I don't really know how to start this video, and I've debated for a long time on how to start this YouTube channel, and I have decided that the best way to go about this is to authentically tell you my story up until this point, because what I want this channel to be is I want this to be us growing together. I'm on my own personal self-growth journey at the moment, and I've been in some really low places, and I know how it feels to be in those low places. And I have, in a sense, made myself the tools to get out of those holes that I've dug myself into, or the holes that other people have dug and then pushed me into. Either way, I've gotten out. And I realize that sometimes when we get in those places, we just want to give up. And I know how easy it can seem to just give up, but honestly, you guys are so much more than that. You all have so much potential. All that pain that you get and receive in this world just has the ability to make you stronger. And sorry, I'm not used to talking in front of a camera. But anyway, if you just let yourself take the opportunity to let yourself live. And it's not saying try to control life, because I think that a big issue we have is we try to control life, and you can't control life. Life is always going to be out of your control. And I think once you realize and accept that, instead of, it's kind of like the ocean, I guess. Don't fight the tides, kind of flow with them. But anyway, we're gonna start out with my own personal childhood. Let's see, I grew up in a town called Rush Springs, Oklahoma. And in that town, I was actually one of the more, I guess I was a popular kid in a sense. I did the cheerleading, I did the dance classes, like I was, I was involved in the community. My mom was going to get her English teaching degree, and my dad ended up being a cop in that town. Now, here's what I'm going to mention about my father, is when I was growing up, he was quite the toxic individual, and he still is to an extent, but he's better than he used to be. And that has greatly affected me growing up, because anytime you have a parent that lashes out or acts out towards a child, the child doesn't understand what's going on. The child says, what did I do wrong? Even if it was something minor, say like if I didn't want to eat what he made me for dinner, because I've always been a picky eater, and my palate has always been, if I don't like it, I will throw it up, and it's something that I can't really control. And that's part of the reason I was so stubborn on it, is because it's not something I could just get over. Anyway, there's actually one point in that childhood that I remember very distinctly. And the reason I bring this up, I'm going to kind of be going in shards, because as an INFP, that's how I tend to recall things, is shards of memories, and that's also how I tend to create things, is in shards. Anyway, he made some raviolis. I've never liked raviolis. He tries to make me eat them. I end up throwing them away because I'm not going to eat them, and I want to go to bed if I'm not going to eat them. And he tried making me sit at this table for forever. And he came in, I told him I was done, and he saw them in the trash can, got them out, and then proceeded to make me eat them, even though I had just thrown them in the trash can, which, by the way, had trash in it. It wasn't an empty trash can. It was not a clean trash can. And that's a very distinct memory for me. And even though it's not very little, it's not very much, that may be where a lot of my my own issues with food that I'll get into later kind of maybe stemmed from a little bit. It's because food has always been something that I necessarily couldn't control. I also used to store bread. Like, I used to hide bread in my room probably because I wasn't allowed to eat at the table, and so I went into like this starvation mode naturally, where people that have starved in their life they'll like stash food everywhere just in case. And so that's kind of a thing that I did. Then eventually we moved to New Mexico. I believe I was in first grade, and over there we were the white kids. We got called Melika, which means white. I cried every recess over there. I didn't have a lot of friends, and that's where a lot of my depression and stuff started. Like, I described my life as a little black box with one window, too high for me to see, just enough to give me light. And then I'd spend the whole time in that little black room crying. And, you know, it's really depressing to think that that was a very profound thought and imagination of how my life was when I was only 6. Now, move on to second grade. We moved to Kansas. Now, I liked Kansas. I fit in okay there. They weren't rude or anything, but I wasn't exactly like everyone else, and I think that's where it comes with the fact that I am an intuitive. And I want you to take this, whenever I say intuitive, I'm talking about the Myers-Briggs system. I have an intuitive style of learning. It's one of my cognitive functions. Everybody has intuition and intuitive senses, but it's whether or not you've used them and like kind of nurtured them in a way. It's kind of like pulling back the curtain. I'm going to use from Personality Hacker. It's like pulling the curtain back, or seeing the patterns in front of the curtain so you can see the patterns kind of behind the curtain. We see a lot of things that sometimes people miss, and it's kind of like the sensory style learning versus the intuitive style learning. And it's like, it's something you never really understand as an intuitive growing up, because nobody gets why whenever they teach you some things, you don't get it, or why whenever they get through the problem the right way, and you're still like, okay, but that doesn't make sense to me because I saw this problem and I figured it out this other way because it seemed to make more sense. And I wasn't even good at math, but there were a few examples I remember in middle school. Now, continuing on, since Kansas wasn't bad, there wasn't really much I have to add there, but we moved back to Oklahoma. I made a friend, and that friend stayed in my life all the way up until 4th grade. And, well, actually it was 5th grade. When we came back from 4th grade, she all of a sudden had this distaste for me. She didn't like me and she didn't want to be around me. And she was friends with this other girl who she kind of been ignoring, I think, since I came there. And she never told me what happened. I never understood. And at that school back in Oklahoma, she was my only friend there. So that was a very like depressing thing to go through as a child. It was like, my only friend doesn't want to be my friend anymore. And it makes you kind of lost, and it makes you get this distrust in people because you just don't understand. And not only was she not my friend anymore, but she would be rude to me and she would treat me a certain way that, you know, generally speaking, I just don't like people treating other people that way. But as a child, it did sting. Now, continuing on about I'm gonna say we're just going through the traumatic stuff right now. My parents had almost gotten a divorce, but that really doesn't have anything to do with me. Just with the principle that from that experience, I believe that if you're going through a breakup, or, you know, if you feel like you're about to go through a breakup, or you guys are fighting a lot and you're fighting badly, And, you know, if you've been unhappy in a relationship for a long period of time, even if you're trying to stay together for kids, my opinion on that since this point in my life has been leave. Because you're causing more damage holding on to people that are digging their thorns into you than you are if you were to just let go and be like, I don't want to deal with this in my life. Because not only are you causing stress on yourself, you're causing stress on everyone else in that situation. Anyway, freshman year, went to a field trip. This is actually, I decided I was going to try to be more normal. I was going to go out for track in the next semester. You know, I was excited for life. Anyway, I had a good day at this field trip. We went to a hockey game. I love hockey. As far as sports go, I like hockey. Anyway, this was an ag field trip. On the bus ride back, there was a guy that had asked if he could sing with me, and I was just like, yeah, okay, sure. I'm over sitting there. He ends up putting my hand in his pants and rubbing my hand on his penis. And I told him no, and I told him to stop, but then I end up freezing up. I'm only like 15 at this point. I just end up freezing up, and it just happens. And he like touches me and stuff, and we get back. And, you know, I kind of hope that's the end of that and I won't have to hear anything. Come to school the next week to find out that he had been going around and he had been telling people that I gave him a blowjob when in fact I did not, but he still touched me. Everyone else, of course, was, you know, calling me ugly things. Like, I don't even want to know. I was only there that one day when I came back because I had a fallout with a friend who had liked said guy. And, well, whenever I got back home, I tried to kill myself. And I tried multiple times because I wasn't used to being in the center of all that negativity. I was used to observing, and I was used to watching. I didn't have a lot of friends. All I did was observe and watch people. I watched them, I watched their social situations, and I just took it all in. And then finding myself at the center of this big thing that I wanted nothing to do with, while at the same time having a friend be mad at me. And with my experiences with friends, having somebody that I trusted turn against me in that time where it was just like, even if it was a misunderstanding, even if maybe I should have like told her what happened, I just didn't think anybody would believe me because I just wasn't a person that was in the forefront of people's minds. I was just this weird kid that didn't have a lot of friends and dyed my hair and listened to emo music. And so it was kind of like this thing where, you know, nobody's going to believe me if I say anything because this guy's got more of a reputation than I do. And I went to a small school. But I ended up taking 48 Tylenol and like 8 NyQuil. And I took that in like 2 or 3 days, so they couldn't just pump my stomach. I'd researched it, I'd looked it up, I found out how I was going to die. I knew how my body was going to shut down. I was aware of the situation. The only reason I told anybody was because I was taking a nap in my mom's bathtub because I felt like hot garbage. And I had this dream, and this dream was like there was a clock and it was ticking, and there was this bloody baby foot, and there was like this tunnel. So it was almost like I saw myself getting born into my next life because I'm dying here. And I've always believed in reincarnation, so mind you, if I will, this is my own personal, like, this is what I saw. I'm not saying this is definite because I don't believe that what my spiritual beliefs are, I don't necessarily believe that they are the one true anything, because there's always room for improvement on beliefs. Anywho, I ended up telling my mom. She takes me to the hospital. Of course, they can't pump my stomach. So they end up sending me to the Oklahoma City Children's Hospital. I'm there for a week. I wasn't allowed to eat or drink anything for a majority of that time because they didn't know whether or not I was going to have to get my liver removed, potentially, because my liver enzymes were through the roof. They were in the like 1,600s, 1,700s by the time I got to the children's hospital. Now, if you don't know anything about liver enzymes, they should only be like around, I think it was like 400 or 500, or maybe that's like still too high. I just know that when they released me, my liver enzymes were still like 500. They released me into which, by the way, if you don't do pills, like don't overdose with pills, because honestly, that activated charcoal is gonna get you. Activated charcoal is hell on earth. It is such an experience, and honestly, if you're gonna have a punishment for trying to kill yourself, activated charcoal should be what you take. This is gonna be a long video. I'm going to actually stop this here because pretty soon my alarm's going to go off, and that's going to ruin the video because I started this too late. I'm gonna make a part 2. So I will see you in part 2. I'll be making this real fast and turning my alarm off.